And I think I'm there. Hello, Jerry. Hello, Jared. Hello, Kenry. Kenry. Hello, Kelly. Kelly's last name is Kenrick, and I managed to say Kenry. Hello, gentleys and ladymen, or ladies and gentlemen, or whatever. Hello, Becca. And welcome to our beautiful office. The large new table behind us because Deb needs a table, so we got a table. And here we are, and here I am. And for those of you who just happen to be wondering what the heck is going on again, my name is Tad Williams. I'm a writer of fantasy and science fiction and stuff. And I'm reading on Sundays for whoever wants to be read to. At this point in time, I'm still reading my own stuff. Slowly working my way through, and I've read a lot of short stories and one short novel, and I'm reading another not quite as short novel now, which was my first book, Tailchaser Song, which I will continue with in just a moment. Before then, anything in particular to talk about? No, and I see others have showed up and checked in, Becca and Stephen and Barb and John. Hello, everybody. Good to see you. And that's pretty much the size of what's going on at the moment. I don't have a whole lot of dramatic anything. If I think of anything, I'll tell you at the ending. We're all still doing what we're doing here, which is hanging in, working, doing stuff. Always under pandemic conditions, so wearing masks and appropriate things, and watching the news nervously because sometimes it seems like there's just a mountain of crazy stuff and crazy people and crazy behavior going on all around us. And there are times when it all seems a bit overwhelming. On the other hand, I lived through the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the 2010s, the 2000s, whatever you want to call them, and the 2010s that we've just finished. And it's all crazy. So, what's the diff? The main thing is to do the best you can with what you've got and love the folks you love and take care of them. Really, honestly, and do things that you care about and try to make the world a slightly better place. That's it. That's the sum total, as far as I'm concerned, of what we can all do during difficult times. And of course, keep our minds open, very open, to change, to the things that can be done, and etc. One of the people asked how Alexis is doing, who I had talked about last week, I think. And as far as I know, Alexis is okay. Alexis had perhaps a fainting disorder or something, and a lot of friends were very, very concerned about her. Apparently she's okay. We haven't really had much chance to talk since then, but as far as I know, she got home okay after the medical alarm, and she is okay. And I'm using that word a lot. That's the sum total of my knowledge. And Alexis, if you're out there tonight, there are people who are concerned about you because we were sending good wishes to you last time while we were reading. So if you want to pop in and say hello and show everybody that you're not buried in my backyard or something. Although God knows what all is buried in our backyard. It's large and full of wildness, and who knows, the area that I live in, the Santa Cruz Mountains, was for a time when I was a teenager, the serial murder capital of the world. That was our claim to fame. We had 3 or 4 actual working, I use the term loosely, but active serial murderers in the 1970s that were all operating at the same time. And it's an interesting, strange thing to grow up with. And I actually lived up in the hills as a teenager for a while, and actually had a guy come to my door once with an axe in his hands, demanding something that apparently that he thought the previous owner of the cabin I was living in, my friend Josh and I were living in, actually, because it was Josh's folks' cabin. Anyway, he was under the impression that somebody there had his stuff, this kind of Manson-esque sort of ex-hippie type, and showed up at our door with a very large axe, which was interesting and scary and strange. So Santa Cruz Mountains are always an interesting and fun place to live. They're beautiful, of course, also. And that's why we're here, because we work from home. And one of our big requirements is we have to live someplace that we like, because we don't get out that much, me in particular. So that's your little update. But seriously, no, look it up sometime. There was just a ton of serial killer activity in the mid 70s up in this area of California. I'm not saying it like I'm proud of it. I'm not proud of it. It's just an interesting fact that at the same time we were living this very liberal, open-minded, education-based, kind of life in California before Silicon Valley made some people extremely rich and changed the nature of where we live. We were, living in this kind of college town area, and just up the hills above us, there were people being murdered in fairly large quantities by several different murderers. So this is one of the many things. When I finally get around to writing not in my autobiography, I don't think I'll ever write anything like that, but I might write a novel set. I intend to write a novel set in that time period, and that was certainly part of what was going on at the time, and part of what added a certain piquancy to the being in the hills, being in the beautiful hills up above the Palo Alto, where I grew up. So we were kind of part of a triangle of the 60s. Berkeley, San Francisco, Palo Alto. Palo Alto was that way because of a couple of things. Stanford University, but also because the VA hospital where Ken Kesey worked is just across the road from where we grew up, and a bunch of things like that. So a lot of really crucial things about the 60s, especially in America, happened in the San Francisco Bay Area, as you probably know. And it wasn't just Haight-Ashbury. It wasn't just the free speech movement. It was all kinds of things that were going on. And it's one of the reasons that I will, not that it was like a big major ambition of mine, but it's one of the reasons I will almost certainly never be the most famous alumnus of Palo Alto High School, because I was preceded there by people like Joan Baez and some members of the Grateful Dead. And I don't know if Grace Slick went to Pali, but she lived next door to one of my friends, and her parents did anyway. I don't know how long Grace was there. So it was an interesting place to grow up, and someday I will address some of those things in fictional form, I'm sure. Jerry is kicking in other other serial killers. Yeah, those are Southern California serial killers. You mentioned Zodiac. Oh no, Zodiac was Bay Area. Yes, you're right. Hillside Strangler. The Hillside Strangling murders were Southern California. Excuse me. And the Zodiac Killer was actually the Bay Area. I remember the year they canceled Halloween because the Zodiac Killer had threatened to shoot the tires out of a school bus and kill the little kids when they came running off the bus. That was back in the late 60s. So, yeah, it's been an interesting area. We had the Patty Hearst case. We had all kinds of really interesting things going on. So I will get to it one day. I will get to it. But it also probably, some of this strangeness probably informed my decision to write science fiction and fantasy, since I lived in this fairly fantastical world. Anybody interested in the San Francisco Bay Area in the 60s and 70s, by the way, could do a lot worse than to read a book whose author I can't think of the name of right now, but it's called Season of the Witch, like the old ancient now Donovan song. Season of the Witch, and it's about the 60s and 70s in the Bay Area. Everything from the stuff I've just mentioned to the Jonestown and the assassination of George Moscone and Harvey Milk by Dan White, and any number of other crazy, interesting, newsworthy things that were going on when I was growing up. Like the Chinese said, interesting times. So even as bad as things are these days, there is a part of me that says, I've seen some pretty extreme stuff. So, I think we'll survive somehow. But only by being decent human beings, taking care of each other, and improving the world and the society in which we live. All right, end of lecture. So, back to Tailchaser Song. I read chapters 4 and 5 last night, and what happened in 4 and 5. In chapter 4, Tailchaser met up with an old acquaintance of his, an older male named Stretch Slow, who had captured a female squirrel that he was planning to eat, but he'd actually been looking for Tailchaser. But because Tailchaser made a deal with the local squirrels, also known as the Rick Chick Chick, to try to save this female squirrel if they would stop trying to kill him by throwing things down on him, Tailchaser actually talked this older male Stretch Slow into letting the female go, and then was celebrated as essentially a friend of squirrels. FOS, friend of squirrels. And at least in this case, it's a good thing to be a friend of squirrels, although Fritty also promised that he would not hunt any more squirrels. So it was a bit of a trade-off. But he was also taught by Lord Snap, who was the kind of ranking squirrel, a phrase that he can use in other places if he ever needs the help of squirrels. And as a writer of fiction, I suspect that that will be useful later on somehow. Now, in the next chapter, Fritty continued on his quest to save his friend Hushpad, who has disappeared, along with many other cats. But Fritty, of course, is most interested in Hushpad. And he has continued on in his quest to find and rescue Hushpad from whatever fate took her away from him and from the place where Tailchaser lived and out into the wilderness. And he is trying to find her. So at the very end of the last thing we were reading, Tailchaser woke in the middle of the night to hear a fox and the mewing of a small cat or a kitten who was being beset by this fox. And when he went to go see what it was, he realized that the kitten out here in the middle of nowhere being threatened by a fox was his friend from back in Meeting Wall, the very young kitten, Pouncequick. And that was the end of chapter 5. So that is where we are starting now with chapter 6 of Tailchaser Song, my first book. Chapter 6. Let's do it without the glasses. Chapter 6. Cats in their huddled sleep, two heaps of fur made one, twitch their ears and whimper. Do they dream the same dream? Eric Barker. Pouncequick! Little Pouncequick! Fritty loped down the shrub-spotted slope. It's me, Tailchaser. The youngling, from his sagging, defensive posture, turned a drooping eye in Fritty's direction, but showed no sign of recognition. The fox turned sharply to look at the oncoming Tailchaser, but gave no ground. When Fritty drew to a halt a jump or two away, the weasel barked a warning. Come no closer, bark Scrabbler. I will do for you also. Tailchaser could now see that the weasel was a female, and despite her ruffled hackles, weasel, by the way, a lot of these words are cat words, so weasel, V-I-S-L, is the word for fox. That the weasel was a female, and despite her ruffled hackles, not much bigger than he. She was thin, too, and her legs were trembling, whether from anger or fear, Fritty could not tell. Why do you menace this cat, Punt sister? Sang Fritty, slowly and soothingly. Has he done wrong to you? He is my cousin's son, and I must stand for him. The ritualistic question seemed to calm the fox a little, but she did not back off. He menaced my pups, she said, panting. I will fight you both if I must. Her pups? Tailchaser understood the situation better. Fox mothers, just as the matriarchs of the folk, would do anything to protect their litters. He looked at her protruding ribs. It must have been a difficult autumn for mother and young. How is your family menaced? Tailchaser inquired. Pouncequick, a jump away, was staring fixedly at the weasel, seemingly unaware of Fritty's presence. The she-fox looked at Fritty appraisingly. In the morning dark, I had taken the pups out prowling, she began, when I smelled predators, large ones. The scent was unfamiliar, but it had something of badgers and something of cats. I hurried the pups down to the den and lay on them to keep them quiet, but the danger smell did not go away. So I decided to lead whatever lurked out there away from the nest. I told the pups to stay where they were, then broke from a second burrow entrance. The smell was very strong. The predators were near. I showed myself briefly and ran. After a moment, I heard something following. I took them down ravine and up the basin's edge. I even exposed myself to sight on the long meadow in hopes of getting a moon glimpse of what pursued me. What were they? Tailchaser interrupted. The Vizzle glared at him and her hackles bristled. Patience, Tailchaser chided himself. I don't know, cat, she said. They were too smart to follow out onto the grassland. When they didn't appear, I had to double back, for fear they had given me up and gone back to seek my den. As I said, though, they were cruelly clever. They were waiting for me when I re-entered the scrub wood, and I had to run like Renred to get away. They kept to shadows and underbrush, though. I don't even know to a certainty how many there were. More than 3, I think. Fritty admired the fox mother for her bravery. He wondered if he would be as selfless in a similar situation. The Vizzle spoke again. Anyway, I ran and ran, far enough that I felt safe for my young, and finally left them in a gorse thicket with a few false scents to chase. I hope you're listening very carefully. I seldom speak to cats, and I never repeat myself for them. I am listening with great interest, Hunt sister. Very well. The fox looked somewhat mollified. Fritty hoped that they could settle whatever kittenish mistake Poundsquick had made without resorting to claw and tooth. Well, after taking a confusing route back, I arrived at my nest to hear my pups making a terrible noise, barking and yelping and calling for me. I found this little monster in the nest with them. Obviously, the others had led me off, and he had then snuck in to do harm to my young. Again she bristled. Tailchaser was about to say something calming when Poundsquick cried out shrilly. Fritty and the fox turned to see the kitten starting forward, panting. No, no, I was hiding, cried Poundsquick piteously. Hiding from them. The kitten began to shiver uncontrollably. Fritty, worried for his little friend, began to move slowly toward him. Hunt sister, in your understandable concern for your litter, I think you have mistaken another victim for one of the wrongdoers. He was at Poundsquick's side now. The little cat buried his nose miserably in Tailchaser's flank and whimpered. The fox pinned Fritty with a shrewd gaze. What is your name, cat? Tailchaser, of the Meeting Wall clan, he replied respectfully. His soft singing seemed to have prevented conflict. I am called Karthwina, said the fox. I will allow you to take your cousin's son without malice. You, however, must take the responsibility for keeping him out of the dens of my folk. If I find him again near my pups, there will be no compromise. That is more than fair, Karthwina, said Tailchaser, giving a little head dip of acceptance. The she-Vizzle looked him up and down, then turned a final glance to Poundsquick, whose face was hidden against Tailchaser's belly. You sing well, Tailchaser, the fox said slowly, taking care with her words. But do not think to rely on that alone in the world. We foxes sing too, and we know many things. But we also teach our pups how to bite. She turned and stalked away in great solemnity. The dawn was breaking above them as Tailchaser lay with a shuddering Poundsquick, singing quiet songs of reassurance. After a while, when the kitten's terror had subsided, Fritty led him back to the sleeping tree and curled up around him. As the morning sun rose, covering the woodland floor with crisscrossed shadows, they fell asleep. The heat of smaller shadows woke Tailchaser. Poundsquick was no longer nestled against him. Fritty raised his head and saw the young catling up and frolicking, soft fur a-clutter with pine needles and dead leaves. When Fritty rose and stretched, he discovered a great soreness in his muscles. Watching the gambolling kitten with envy, he decided that he would have to set an easier pace until... Watching the gambolling kitten with envy, he decided that he would have to set an easier pace until he became more accustomed to this steady traveling. Pouncequick, still cavorting happily while Fritty sunned his aching legs and paws, seemed to have recovered completely from the terrors of the night before. When Fritty asked him about what had happened, however, a shade of disquiet came into the youngling's eyes. Can we talk about it after we eat, Tailchaser? He asked. I'm very hungry. Fritty assented, and the next part of the afternoon was spent in a none too effectual hunt, spoiled in a large part by Pouncequick's tendency to squeak when excited. They did manage to capture a couple of beetles, which, strangely ticklish going down, were at least filling. After finding a still but drinkable puddle of water, they settled down in the shade to digest. The long, sleepy silence was broken only by the lulling whir of unseen insects. Then, as Fritty felt himself drifting into sleep, Pouncequick began to talk. I know I shouldn't have followed you, Tailchaser. I'm sure I'll be a burden, but I want so much to help you. You've been kind to me many times when Fleetpaw and the rest just cuffed me about or teased me. I knew you wouldn't let me come, though, so I hid until you set out, and then I tracked you, all by myself, he added proudly. Ah, so that's why you were asking about my leave-taking among the folk. That's right. I wanted to know where you were leaving from. I'm not that good at tracker, he added a little morosely, then brightened. Anyway, I kept my nose to the ground and followed. Everything went fairly well until midday or so, then I got confused. For a while, it seemed like your trail had turned into someone else's, and then it doubled back on itself and up and down trees. At least it smelled that way. When I found the track again, your traces were pretty cold. I followed as best I could, but it was getting dark, and I was hungry. Actually, I still am. Could we go find a few more beetles or something? Later, Pouncequick, snorted Fritty. Later. First, I want to hear the rest of your song, little Sunray. Oh, yes. Well, I was trying to make up ground on you, hoping you would stop to sleep or something, when I heard the most awful noise. It was a huge group of birds, and they were all twittering and shrieking at the same time. I looked up, and there were hundreds of them, a whole cloud of flies, all flying like mad around this tree and making a terrible fuss. It must have been horrible up top. There were piles of dead flies, ripped and bitten, and feathers everywhere, floating down from the upper branches. And when I looked up, I could see eyes. What do you mean, eyes? Fritty questioned. Eyes! Big, pale, yellow ones, like nothing I've ever seen. There were too many branches in the way for me to see anything else, but I know I wasn't mistaken. Then, whatever it was made a hissing noise at me, and I ran. I think it came down the tree after me, Tailchaser, because the birds stopped making that terrible ruckus. But I didn't look back to find out. I just ran. Pouncequick paused for a moment with his eyes closed, then continued. I think that there might have been more than one. From the sounds I heard, they were fast, and if I wasn't small, able to get under bushes and such, they would have caught me. I have never been so frightened, not even when a growler was after me. Finally, I could barely run anymore. I was slowing down. I couldn't hear anything behind me, though, so I stopped to listen more carefully. I was standing there with my ears up, and something reached out from under a rock and grabbed me. From under a rock? Said Tailchaser incredulously. I swear by the first, it grabbed my leg. Here, see these scratches? Pouncequick displayed his wounds. You won't believe this either, Tailchaser, but the thing that grabbed me, whatever it was, it had red claws. Well, you said that something was killing the birds. It was probably blood. After half an hour of chasing me over dirt and brambles, it would have come clean. Besides, this wasn't dried blood. This was bright red. Puzzled, Fritty gestured for the young one to continue. I shrieked like a jay, of course, and managed somehow to pull away. I went into a tangle bush as deep as I could, hoping they were too big to come in after me. I couldn't run any farther. They didn't make any noise then, but I could sense they were still there. Then I smelled fox, and suddenly they were off. After I'd waited a while, I staggered out from the bush and found the den burrow. I supposed I'd go down just inside where I'd be able to have some defense if they came back for me. Then the vigil returned. I guess you know the rest. Fritty leaned forward and gave the youngster a nose rub on his forehead. You were very brave, Pouncequick. Very brave. So you never saw what it was that chased you? Not quite, no. But I will never forget those eyes and those red claws. Whew! Pouncequick shook himself from nose to tail, then turned to Tailchaser. Anxiety melted away. All that talk of fuzz has made me ravenous. Did I mention that I was hungry? I think you did, laughed Tailchaser. They rested through the afternoon and set out again at twilight. Tailchaser had some misgivings about keeping young Pouncequick with him, but decided that he really had no other choice. He couldn't send the little cat away, back through the dangerous woods, and he himself could not give up his quest to find Hushpad. They did make a fairly good pace. Pouncequick tended to trot ahead for a while, then lag behind, fascinated by a butterfly or a shiny stone, and it seemed to even out more or less, and their progress was steady. Pouncequick even managed to curb his squeaking a little, and the hunting improved. Several days passed. They fell into a routine of alternating walks and rests, a long sleep at midday when the sun was high, and another at final dancing, lasting until sunrise. They hunted as they traveled, catching the odd beetle or small bird hidden in the brush, and hunted bigger game only before the lying-in time of smaller shadows. One afternoon, Pouncequick caught a squeaker all by himself. It was a young mouse, and a very stupid one at that, but Pouncequick caught it without help and was justifiably proud. Moreover, Fritty decided, it tasted just as good as the cleverer sort. Their companionship eased the tedium of the journey for both cats, and the days flew swiftly by. Although Pouncequick's incessant bounding and capering occasionally drove Fritty to snarling and swatting, he was still very glad to have the little cat for company. As for Pouncequick, he was delighted to be adventuring with an admired elder. The shadow of his first night in the wild seemed to have vanished, leaving no trace. The forest seemed to change around them as they traveled, now thick and knotted, choked as tanglebush, then open and airy as edge copse. Then, at the end of their 5th day in the woods, the trees began to appear successively smaller and farther apart. Topping a jutting rock that stood out among the treetops, like a phala above her kittens, Tailchaser and Pouncequick stood and watched the sun of their 6th day rise. The forest below them stretched away another league or two, becoming steadily sparser, then dwindled to an end. Beyond it lay rolling green downs. Clusters of trees sat in the hollows between their rounded sides. The downs stretched on into the distance, their farthest reaches shrouded in early morning fog. Beyond that might lie more hill land, or forests, or anything. No one Tailchaser knew had ever spoken of what lay beyond the old woods. The two companions scented the breeze, drinking up the smells rising on the warming air. Pouncequick looked down, then butted Fritty's side. Below them, on a subordinate peak of the outcropping, stood another cat. It was a strange sight, all muddy, with tangled fur and wild eyes. As Tailchaser and Pouncequick stared, the unknown cat looked up at them with a strange, unfocused gaze. They had only a moment more to wonder at its ragged pelt and crooked tail. Then the stranger leaped down from the rock, landing unsteadily on a wide limb, and vanished into the foliage. Where it had passed, the leaves bobbed for a moment, then were still. Chapter 7. "Oh, you can't help that," said the cat. We're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad. How do you know I'm mad? Said Alice. You must be, said the cat, or you wouldn't have come here. Lewis Carroll. Tailchaser was doing a lot of thinking. The long days of walking had given him time to do that, and he was adding up facts in a very careful way. Pouncequick's story of pursuit fit in with the other things he had heard. The disappearance of some of the folk, the Rick-Chick-Chick's tales of cat raids. Lord Snap had mentioned 4 cats. The number alone made Fritty believe someone other than folk was responsible for the raids on the squirrel nests. And Carthwena, the fox, had said that the beasts had smelled part badger, part cat. Perhaps the creatures looked just enough like cats to lead small animals like the Rick-Chick-Chick to a false conclusion. Even Stretch-Slow had said that something strange was in the air. A new kind of marauding beast? Pouncequick's descriptions of eyes and claws came back to him, and he shuddered. With a sudden start, he thought of Hushpad. Could those things have gotten her? But no, he had smelled no fear at her empty nesting place. They might have caught her in the forest, though. Poor Hushpad. Such a big world, and so full of dangers. His attention was diverted by Pouncequick, who was annoying a badger. The great digging beasts could be savage when they needed to be. Tailchaser threw over his pondering and hurried to extricate the youngling from a potential disaster. Dragging Pouncequick away by the scruff of the neck, Fritty mumbled an apology to the nettled badger. The beast grunted scornfully at him as he retreated, then waddled off, striped sides huffing. A lecture failed to dampen Pouncequick much. Soon they were off again, heading toward the outer edge of the old woods. Waking from his midday nap, Tailchaser felt eyes upon him. Across the clearing stood the strange cat they had seen at the jutting rock. Before Fritty could untangle himself from the snoring Pouncequick, the cat was gone, leaving no trace. It seemed to Fritty that the odd creature had been about to speak to him. There had been a strange yearning in its eyes. That evening, as they were crossing a stand of aspens, the cat again appeared before them. This time it did not run away, but stood, gnawing its lower lip nervously as they approached. Seen up close, the cat was a fantastic sight. Its original color was long since hidden under the dirt and mud that caked its fur and twined the hair into swirls and tangles. Sticks and leaves, bits of tree lichen and evergreen needles, all manner of odd clutter festooned its coat from head to tail tip. It had bent whiskers, and its eyes looked sad and puzzled. "Who are you, Hunt Brother?" asked Fritty cautiously. "Do you seek us?" Pouncequick hung close by Tailchaser's side. Who? The Roo-hoo," the stranger intoned solemnly, then fell to chewing his lip again. His voice was deep and male. "What is your name?" Fritty tried again. "Ixum, Squixum, Hollow, and Hellion. How so?" The strange cat looked vaguely into Fritty's eyes. "Eat bugs is me. I am. I ran, so I am. So you see." "He's mad, Tailchaser," squeaked Pouncequick nervously. "He has the dripping mouth sickness, I'm sure of it." Fritty signaled him to hush. "You are called Eat Bugs? That is your name?" The same. Grass Gobbler and Stone Chewer. Isky, pisky, squiddlum, squee. Oh, no!" Eat Bugs whirled around as if something were creeping up behind him. "Roint thee!" he cried at the empty air. "No more of your dandly dancing. Out of earshot, you hugger-mugger hiss-mouse." He turned back toward the cats with a wild look in his eyes, but as they stared, a change seemed to come over him. The crazed look was replaced by one of embarrassment. Old Eat Bugs gets confused sometimes. He does. he said, and scuffed the ground with his grimy paw. "He don't mean no harm, though. Never would, you see." Pouncequick hissed with alarm. "He is mad. Did you see him? We must go." Tailchaser was also a little nervous, but something about the old cat touched him. "What can we do for you? Eat bugs?" he asked. Pouncequick stared at him as though he too had gone quite mad. "There you are," the stranger said. "There you be. Old Eat Bugs, we're just lonesome for some talk. It's a big world, but precious few there are to speak with." The old cat scratched distractedly at his ear and dislodged a small seed pod, which fell to the ground. Eat Bugs bent and sniffed it eagerly, then a moment later swiped at it angrily with his paw and sent it rolling away. "That's your world now, isn't it? That's your world," he mumbled, then seemed to remember the others. "Your pardon, young masters," he said. "I do wander a bit betimes. Might I walk with you a ways? I do know some stories and a game or two. I was a hunter when the world was a pup, and I catch a fair bit of game still." He looked hopefully at Fritty. Tailchaser did not really want another companion, but he felt sorry for this scruffy old Tom. Ignoring Pouncequick's frantic "no" signals, he said, "Certainly. We would be honored to have you accompany us for a while, Eat Bugs." The mud-splattered old cat leaped up and cut a caper in the air so ridiculous that even Pouncequick had to laugh. "Piglets and paw prints!" cried Eat Bugs, then paused and looked quickly around. He leaned forward. He leaned toward his companions. "Let's be off," he added, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. Eat Bugs was not a bad traveling companion. His occasional fits did not prove dangerous in any way, and after a while even Pouncequick accepted him without too much trepidation. He kept up a constant stream of songs and strange poetry all through the evening. When Fritty, wanting a little peace, finally asked him to quiet down, he became silent as mud. When they stopped to rest at final dancing, Eat Bugs was still not speaking. Fritty felt badly about how the old cat had taken his admonishment. He had not wanted to silence him completely. He walked over to the stranger, who was lying on the ground with his eyes in that odd, unfixed gaze. "You told us that you knew some stories, Eat Bugs. Why don't you give us one? We'd enjoy it." Eat Bugs did not immediately respond. When he raised his head to look at Tailchaser, his eyes were filled with a great and terrible sadness. At first, Fritty thought that he had been the cause, but a moment's observation showed that the old cat wasn't seeing him at all. The look suddenly passed from Eat Bug's begrimed mask, and his eyes focused on Tailchaser. A weak smile came to his mouth. What, lad? What? A story? You said that you would tell us a story, Eat Bugs." Yes, I did. And I know plenty. Ramblers and tumblers and bottom droppers. What do you want to hear about?" "One about Firefoot, his adventures," said Pouncequick eagerly. "Oh," said Eat Bug, shaking his muddy head, "I'm afraid I don't know any good ones, Kitling. Not about Firefoot. What else?" "Well," Pouncequick pondered, disappointed. "What about growlers? Big mean growlers. And brave cats. How about that?" "By the sniffling snail, I do happen to know a good one about the growlers. Shall I sing it for you?" "Oh, please do," said Pouncequick, wiggling in his fur. He had missed stories. "All right," said Eat Bugs, and he did. "Long ago, when cats were cats, and rats and mice sang mumbledy-peg in the brush at night, the growlers and the folk lived in peace. The last of the devil hounds had died out, and their more peaceable descendants hunted alongside our ancestrous ancestors. There was a prince, oh, such a prince, named Redlegs, who had suffered great unhappiness in the court where his mother, Queen Cloudleaper, ruled. He went whispering and dancing into the wilderness to hugger-mugger with the rocks and trees and to have adventures. Just like Firefoot, squeaked Pouncequick. Hush, hissed Fritty. Well, continued Eatbugs, one day, when the sun was high in the sky and hurt his eyes, Redlegs came upon two giant piles of bones lying on either side of his path at the mouth of the valley. He knew that he was at the gates of Bar Bar Bar, the city of the dogs. Growlers and folk had no quarrel at this time, and Redlegs was anyway a prince of his people. So he entered into the valley. Around him he did spy every manner of growler, tall and small, fat and flat, who leaped and bounded and barked, and dug holes, and carried bones hither and yon. But most of the bones were being carried to the pillars of the gate, where the yapping and yelping crews clambered up the piles and laid them on top. As the day wore on, the shinnying growlers had more and more difficulty getting to the top, where they were trying, dry-nosed and gasping, to join the pillars into an arch. Finally, a huge and majestic mastiff appeared, barking commands. The growlers jumped and gyrated in their efforts to please him, but at last nothing further could be done to join the pillars at the apex. Every leg sprightly pup of the dog city was sent up to fill that last small gap, which was but one bone length wide. But none could climb to the top of the curving pillars. Tailchaser had an unusual feeling. As he lay, eyes tightly shut, listening to Eatbugs' song, he found that he could see the events in a way that he had never been able to at Meeting Wall. In his mind's eye, he witnessed the leaning towers of bone, the efforts of the growler folk and their mastiff leader, as clearly as if he had been present. Why did he feel this way? He licked his foreleg and washed his face, concentrating on the old cat's words. Now, Eatbugs was saying, in those days, dogs had not become the lick man, drunk slobber wretches we see today. But the folk have always found them amusing, unless in direct battle, you see. So, as Redlegs watched the parade of frightened doglings shinning up the gate arch, only to come cowering down in defeat a moment later, he could not help laughing. At the sound of this, the huge mastiff turned in anger, and Gullet growled, "Who are you that laughs so, cat?" Redlegs stilled his merriment and said, "I am Redlegs of the line of Hurrah." The mastiff looked at him. "I am Raro, Bite Than Bark, of these dogs the king. It is not meet or seemly that I should be mocked in this way." At this, the dog king puffed out his chest and goggled his eyes in such an important way, that Redlegs almost laughed again. "How long have you been building your gate, O king?" "Full 3 seasons it has been," replied Bite Than Bark, "and we but lack one bone to make it complete." "So I see," said Redlegs, and suddenly he was of an inclination to play a trick on the puff-puddle-pompous king of the dogs. "Your Majesty, if I can finish your gate for you, will you grant me one favor?" "What would that be?" inquired the king, suspicious-like. "If I can do your task, I would like a bone for my own." The king, thinking of the thousands of bones that he held sway over, yapped with delight at the cheapness of the request and said, "You shall have any bone you desire in my kingdom, only you do this for me." So Redlegs agreed. and taking the last bone piece of the gate in his mouth, climbed carefully and skillfully up the swaying arch. When he got to the top, he carefully pushed the final piece between the tips of the two curving towers, where it fit like the last scale Mirslar Allmother put on lizards. Then he walked down again, while all the growlers bark, 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 and harumph, harumph, harumph with pleasure to see their work completed and their mighty gate standing finished. While all stared upwards, ears flopping and tongues lolling in glee, Redlegs walked to the base of one of the gate towers. He searched, scrupulous careful, for a moment, then leaned forward and tugged out one of the bones that was therein piled. Nothing happened. For a few hiccuping heartbeats, then waver, wail, and wallow. The gate bent a little to this side, a little to that side, and collapsed with a noise like all the dancing dead. When King Raro Bite Then Bark, drooling with shock and horror, turned to look at Redlegs, the prince only said to him, "See, I chose my bone as you stipulated," and began to laugh. Looking from Redlegs to his shattered gate, the eyes of the king became red with fury, and he would get that cursed cat, kill him. And all the growlers, a bar, 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 leaped up at once and did sprint after Redlegs, who was nonetheless too fast for them, and made his escape. Over his shoulder as he ran, he called back, "Think of me, O king, when next in your pride you gnaw at a hip bone on your unburied dunghill throne." So it is that these days we cats and those dogs are enemies wherever we meet. In these fields we know. They have never forgiven the humiliation of their king, and pledge they never shall, till the sun falls from the sky and snakes learn to fly on the morning breeze. When Eatbugs finished his song, Pouncequick was already asleep, rumbling softly. Fritty felt the strange feeling of true seeing leave him. He wished to question the muddied stranger cat, but Eatbugs was in a staring trance, half asleep, and would not respond. Finally, Tailchaser also succumbed to the voice of sleep and crossed over into the fields of dreams. The morning sun had risen high into the sky when Tailchaser was ousted from slumber by the kneading pressure on his chest and stomach. Pouncequick, still dozing, was treading softly with his paws as he lay curled against Fritty. The kitten, only recently weaned, was probably dreaming of his mother and nest. Tailchaser again felt a prick of worry over exposing his young companion to the dangers of the quest. The folk were normally solitary hunters and adventurers, once out of kittenhood. Responsibility felt a little unnatural. Of course, he thought, many unnatural things have been happening of late. As Pouncequick continued his sleepy milk tread, Fritty was reminded of his own mother, and was suddenly glad for the security of another warm, furry body to curl up with in these strange environs. He licked the soft fur of Pouncequick's inner ear, and the sleeping kitten rumbled happily. Fritty was just drifting back down into sleep when he heard a voice. Eatbugs was up and stalking around, talking to himself. His eyes had the faraway look that Fritty had already seen. He carried his tattered, grime-spattered body, erect and tensed. "Pounding and pumping, and trapped. Here we are, trapped, pinned beneath this wall, this wiggly-woggly wall and all," Eatbugs mumbled vehemently as he paced back and forth before Fritty's fascinated stare. The birds, and the shrieking, striking, jelly-eyed red ones, laughing and dancing. Can't get out. Scratch at the door. Where is it? Must find it. Suddenly, the old cat went all a-bristle, as if surprised by sound or smell. Fritty sensed nothing. Hissing and spitting, claws shot. Eatbugs flattened himself against the ground and snarled in a voice forced out between bared teeth. They're here. I feel them. Why do they want me? Why? He yowled, looking wildly from side to side, as if surrounded by enemies. They need me, and it hurts because me. Forgive. There's a crack in the sky. With this, Eatbug squirmed and shook all over, then sprang away into the underbrush. The commotion of his flight quickly receded into the distance. At Tailchaser's side, his young companion had awakened. What was that? He yawned sleepily and stretched. I thought I heard the most terrible ruckus. It was Eatbug's, Tailchaser responded. I think he's run away. He was having one of his fits. He seemed to think that something was following him. Fritty shook his head from side to side, trying to shed the weird image of Eatbugs. Well, I expect it had to happen, said Pouncequick matter-of-factly. He may be back, Fritty pointed out. Oh, he's not a bad sort, really. Mad as a mockingbird. Tells good stories, though. I quite like the one about Redlegs. Who was Redlegs, anyway? I've never heard Bristlejaw sing of him, or of Queen Cloudleaper either, for that matter. I really don't know, Pounce, said Fritty, and was about to suggest a hunt for breakfast when he finally noticed that the birds had stopped singing. The forest air was completely silent. Suddenly, as quietly as grass growing, several large cats appeared out of the surrounding vegetation. Stranger cats, every one as silent as a shadow. Before the startled Fritty and little Pouncequick could say a thing or make a move, the strange cats had drawn themselves into a wide circle around the pair. Pouncequick began to whimper in fright. The strange cats stared at them with cold, cold eyes. And I think that's where we're going to stop. It was shorter chapters tonight, so it's a little early. But as I said, I'm just going to try and do this evenly. So we will continue. That was chapter 7. So we will continue next time with chapter 8. I think I mentioned last night, I don't think I mentioned to you folks today what I'm working on at the moment. I've just finished and sent out the fairly finished draft of my short novel, which is now going to come out before The Navigator's Children because COVID has played merry hell with all kinds of publishing schedules, most definitely including mine. And even though I was most of the way finished with The Navigator's Children, another immense tad tome, bigger than your grandmother, even though I was almost finished with it for a variety of reasons, mostly because these really big books take longer to prepare, and added to that COVID and the uncertainty thereof and all the strange things that have happened in the last 6 months, 7 months, whatever, Navigator's Children has been put back. So, since the first, this has always been a 5-book project called, as a whole, The Last King of Ostenard. The first book was a short novel called The Heart of Regret. No, sorry, we changed the title. That was the original title, The Heart of Regret. The Heart of What Was Lost. That's the short volume that bridges between the end of the last trilogy, namely To Green Angel Tower, and the first book of this new trilogy, The Witchwood Crown. So The Heart of What Was Lost, then there's the first large book, Witchwood Crown, which of course is long since published and out. The second book, Empire of Grass, which was also been out for a while, although, again, because of COVID, the paperback volume was slightly delayed. I don't know if it's come out yet or not, or is soon to come out. But anyway, so those first two books of the big books are done, and I was finishing the last big book, The Navigator's Children, when all of this stuff went down and the world went crazy. And we all withdrew into our burrows to hide from germs, especially those of us who have people in the family with susceptibilities and are immunocompromised in some way, shape, or form. So at that point, when I realized that Navigator's Children was going to be delayed, I said, well, this might be a good time to write the other short book, which was going to come out at the end of the process. And in fact, it's actually going to be better that it comes out before The Navigator's Children, because this short book, which is called Brothers of the Wind, deals with some of the things that happen in the last volume and give you some added insights, especially about Hakatri, who kind of made an appearance at the end of the second volume. Hakatri was the brother of Inaluki, the Storm King. Forgive me, those of you who don't know these books. I won't be doing this for too long, but I'm just explaining. So anyway, Brothers of the Wind, which tells about how the two Scythian brothers, Hakatri and Inaluki, went to fight a dragon and what happened. And of course, what happened, as those who've read the first set of Ostenard books, the Dragonbone Chair, etc., know, affected history thereafter. So from this one event, much of Ostenard's history has come out. Make an asterisk on Ostenard, because I'll come back to that in a second. So anyway, so that's what the Brothers of the Wind is about. The Brothers of the Wind, the titular Brothers of the Wind, are Inaluki and Hakatri, and although the story is told by one of the Tanuka Daya, who happens to be Hakatri's personal squire and servant, what it's essentially about is how that important moment in history came to be that changed everything. So that book is now going to come out before Navigator's Children, and I basically just finished the main draft of that after getting help and feedback from various of my trusted advisors. And so that's where I am at the moment. I'm just about to go back to the Navigator's Children, but I'm also going to do my share now of the third Ordinary Farm book, or if you are one of my German readers, the Tinker Farm books. So Deb has done the first draft, and that's waiting for me to do the second draft. And, when time permits, I occasionally write some short fiction or even sleep sometimes, just for the hell of it. So that's basically where I'm at, and I just wanted to let you all know that. I'll be writing a more official explanation and what we know of the pub dates and all that stuff. As we get some publication dates, I'll be posting it here on my website and various other places. Deb and I will be sharing it on Twitter as well, and then we will also be sending it out to the Tad Williams mailing list. It really is weird to me to have my name on these things and to have to refer to them as the Tad Williams mailing list or tadwilliams.com. Sounds very strange to me. Then again, it's pretty much just like saying me.com, I don't know. So, with that said, I have now brought you up to date on that. We will continue next Sunday, except it will be really for me Saturday night, 2 o'clock in the morning, Sunday, Pacific Daylight Time. We will read the next 2 chapters, probably. And then a week from now, next Sunday at 7 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, which is what this slot has been that we've just finished, I will be reading the section after that. So, hope you will continue to come see me if you missed something and wanted to catch up and don't want to just sit down and read it yourself, but actually for some masochistic reason want to hear me burbling and babbling and doing strange voices, especially without preparing any of them ahead of time, which is a complete no-no for an old theater hack like me, but that's just how it's working out. I'm just faking it as I go. But anyway, so if you do want to see any of them, they should all be available here on my Facebook page if you just keep scrolling back, and I believe that one of my very kind listeners is also posting them on YouTube, and there are also links to them on me.com, tadwilliams.com. So anyway, with that, I am going to wrap it up for the night. Thank you all so much for joining me. Thank you all so much for helping me to maintain the illusion that I am not merely talking to myself through this computer of mine and that somebody is actually listening, because that's a crucial bit of self-deception that I need to keep going. So thank you for that. And if it's all of you, it's one person, like my mom or something, who's signed up for all these accounts just to make it look like somebody's actually listening and paying attention. Thanks, Mom. I appreciate it. It's kind of you. But whatever the case is, I hope you will all come back to join me, and I hope you will all take very good care of yourselves and your loved ones. Wear a frickin' mask when you go out. I know you all do, because you're intelligent, sensible people who, you know, have already shown your good taste and good sense by liking my fiction. But please caution those around you to do the same, that so we can get rid of this stuff. The United States, my country, now has a quarter of the world's cases with like 14% of the world's population. So we have massively screwed up. So do your best to help make up for those who didn't do a very good job first time around. And let's get this licked so some of the folks who are really in danger for their health can start going back out and living in the world again. People like me, we're okay. We'll do all right. But there's a lot of people who just are having a tough time. So try and help them out. Whatever else you do, do it with kindness and, you know, the aspiration to make the world a better place. I am going to make the world a better place by eating something, because it's that time of the evening for me. I love y'all. I thank you, and I say to you good night and best wishes from the Casa Beale Williams, from our house to your house.